Hello again. Today we'll be looking at order of operations. We have a couple of objectives. We want to evaluate expressions using order of operations, and we want to evaluate using your calculators. In math, as in your daily life, there's a set of rules which we must follow to keep things working in an orderly form. Let me give you an example. If you're driving down the road and you come to a traffic light that is red, you stop. If you come to a traffic light that is green, you continue through. Let me ask you, what would happen if everyone didn't play by the same set of rules? You can imagine the chaos that would happen at that intersection, and I really don't want to be there when it happens. In the same way, there's a set of rules that must be applied in math that tells us in what order to do things. So let's look at two equations. If I gave you 6 plus 3 times 2 is equal to 18, or 6 plus 3 times 2 is equal to 12, and I ask you which one is correct, what we need is a set of rules that will tell us the order of operations to follow. So let's look at that set of rules. The first rule tells us to do what is inside the parentheses. The next rule will tell us to evaluate all exponents, followed by do multiplication and division from left to right, and finally do addition and subtraction in order from left to right. Some of you will remember this because you've heard a little saying, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." And while that is true and it does help you to remember this, I want to point out a flaw to you. The please will help you to remember to do parentheses. Excuse will help you to remember to do your exponents. My dear will help you to remember to do multiplication and division, and Aunt Sally will help you to remember addition and subtraction. I do, however, want to point out one thing to you. I occasionally see students that when they use this expression will remember to do what is inside parentheses first, then do the exponents, but then they will get a little befuddled and they will end up doing multiplication next, followed by division. And I need you to remember that every time we do this, it is multiplication and division in order from left to right, followed by addition and subtraction in order from left to right. So let's look once again at the equation we started with. Which one is correct? If we see that we must do multiplication before we do addition, then that requires us to multiply the 3 times 2 first, so we would end up with 6 plus 6 is equal to 12. So our conclusion here is that this is indeed equal to 12. Let's practice some. Evaluate this expression. Let's start with this one, 40 divided by 8 times 5. Our order of operations says do parentheses first, but we have none. So we move on to exponents. We still have none. Then we must do multiplication and division in order from left to right. So if we look at this, our first step would be to divide 40 by 8 and then multiply what we get times 5. So we see here that we get 5 times 5 for a total of 25 for our answer. Let's move to another example. Evaluate this expression. Notice this time we do have some parentheses as well as some exponents. So let's look at that. Our directions tell us to do what is inside the parentheses first. So what we will need to look at is this right here. When we do that step first, we end up with 3 times a negative 4 squared minus 4 squared. Our next step would be to deal with the exponents. So let's look at those. The first thing I have is a negative 4 squared right here, and then over here I have a 4 squared. Please remember that this right here is a subtraction sign. It is not part of this number. So when we evaluate the exponents, we end up with a line that says 3 times 16, since a negative 4 squared is 16, minus 4 squared, which is also 16. That leaves us with 48 minus 16 for a final answer of 32. Let's continue on to another example. Now I have 10 minus 6 over 5 minus 3 minus 4 minus the absolute value of 7 minus 2. I want to talk to you just a little bit here about some parentheses that you don't see, but you need to understand always need to appear in a problem like this. Anytime you have a fraction, it is appropriate for you to think of the numerator as being in parentheses and the denominator as being in parentheses. You also should recognize that the absolute value is as if it is inside parentheses as well. So this is what your line actually looks like, even though you don't see these parentheses written. So now let's start evaluating. I need to evaluate the numerator first, and I get 10 minus 6 is 4, and 5 minus 3 is 2. So I end up with a line that is 4 divided by 2 minus 4 minus, and then the 7 minus 2 inside the absolute value gives us a 5. Let's continue evaluating. 4 divided by 2 is just 2, but let's talk a little bit about the absolute value of 5. The absolute value is a measure of distance, so we're asking ourselves, how far is 5 from 0? So when we evaluate this line, we get 2 minus 4 minus 5. Since we must do this in order from left to right, 2 minus 4 is a negative 2 minus 5 for a final answer of negative 7. Let's look at another example, but this time we want to evaluate using your calculators. We have a problem that looks like this. Once again, I need you to remember that always when you have a fraction, you want to think of it as if you have parentheses around the numerator and the denominator. I also need you to know that because we will be using our calculators, we need to remember that it will open the square root for us, but once you have finished typing your 3, you must close the parentheses to tell it you have ended the square root. Another place that will help you visually is to include numbers that are raised to powers in parentheses. This one's not necessary, but it will help you visually. So what you really should enter on your calculator is something that looks like this. So let's do that. When we enter, we open parentheses, pi plus, open parentheses, 1.2, close parentheses, raised to the third power, and close your numerator. Divided by, open parentheses, the square root of 3. Notice it opened the parentheses, so you must close it. Minus 6, and then close your denominator. When you hit enter, you will end up with the answer, negative 1.14, and you can read the rest of it. That's all of this lecture. It was a short one, I know, so I hope that you'll make it back soon for the next lecture. See you later. Bye.